The illusion of self-understanding suffering in Eastern traditions. In the heart of Buddhist, Jain, and Hindu philosophy lies a profound recognition. Life, as we experience it, is inherently intertwined with suffering. This suffering, however, is not seen as a punishment or a fixed state, but rather as a consequence of our own misperceptions about the nature of reality and the self. Both Buddhist and Jain traditions posit that our clinging to a separate, independent self, known as ego, is the root cause of our suffering. By transcending this illusion of self and cultivating a deep understanding of our true nature, we can break free from the cycle of suffering and attain lasting peace and liberation. Buddhism, in particular, emphasizes the Four Noble Truths as a framework for understanding suffering. The first noble truth acknowledges the reality of suffering, or dukkha. It suggests that suffering is an intrinsic part of life, encompassing everything from physical pain and emotional distress to the subtle dissatisfaction that arises from the impermanent nature of all things. The second noble truth identifies the cause of suffering as craving or attachment, rooted in our ignorance of our true nature. We cling to fleeting pleasures, resist unpleasant experiences, and grasp onto a false sense of self, perpetuating the cycle of suffering. Jainism, similarly, emphasizes the concept of ahimsa, or non-violence, not only in action but also in thought and intention. This principle stems from the belief that all living beings possess a soul, and causing harm to any being, including oneself, creates karma and perpetuates suffering. Jainism emphasizes the importance of minimizing harm and cultivating compassion as pathways to liberation from the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Hinduism, on the other hand, introduces the concept of maya, or illusion, which veils the true nature of reality and leads to suffering. According to Hindu philosophy, suffering arises from our ignorance of the ultimate reality, Brahman, and our identification with the transient world. By realizing the oneness of Atman, the self, with Brahman, the ultimate reality, one can transcend suffering and achieve moksha, or liberation. Both traditions offer a path to liberation from suffering by cultivating wisdom and compassion. By understanding the nature of reality and the interconnectedness of all things, we can transcend the illusion of a separate self and experience true freedom. This journey requires courage, commitment, and a willingness to look deeply into the nature of our own minds. Beyond the I, embracing the concept of anatta. Central to both Buddhist and Jain philosophy is the concept of anatta in Buddhism and anikantavada in Jainism, often translated as non-self or not self. This profound concept challenges our deeply ingrained belief in a permanent, independent self or soul. It suggests that what we perceive as our self is not a singular, unchanging entity, but rather a constantly changing flow of physical and mental processes. There is no permanent, unchanging I residing within us. Understanding anatta is crucial to dismantling the illusion of a separate self. We begin to see that our thoughts, emotions, and experiences are not who we truly are, but rather transient phenomena arising and passing away in the stream of consciousness. This realization liberates us from the suffering that arises from clinging to a fixed identity. The concept of anikantavada in Jainism, meaning non-one-sidedness or manifold aspects, emphasizes the multifaceted nature of reality. It suggests that truth is not absolute, but relative to one's perspective. This principle encourages us to see beyond our limited viewpoints and acknowledge the validity of other perspectives, fostering tolerance and compassion. By letting go of the notion of a separate self, we open ourselves to a more spacious and interconnected way of being. We can begin to experience the world with greater clarity, compassion, and a sense of interconnectedness with all things. This shift in perspective has profound implications for how we relate to ourselves, others, and the world around us.